Hi, everyone. This is the Incept Connect podcast. I am John Osberg, growth strategist at Incept Digital here in downtown Buffalo, New York. Today, I am joined by someone who I hold in high regard as it's related to community building, business building, and the DEIB, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging communities. And that's none other than Glenn Jackson of M&T Bank. Glenn, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, John. Good to be here.
Glad to have you here, man. I know it took a little while with busy schedules, but seriously, our most valuable commodity is time. So I appreciate you spending some time with us and talking all things diversity in a time where it's never been as important to be talked about. So who better than to have you here in conversation?
It's good to be here with you. Thank you, John.
I appreciate you coming. So Glenn, for the audience, M&T Bank, DEI, you're their CDO. You've been there. Has it been your whole career?
Yeah, 23 years.
23 years,
yeah.
Man.
Yep.
Why don't you maybe we just step back and professional intro to our listeners and watchers?
Yeah, so I came right out of college. I went to Harvard and went into M&T Bank, came through their management development program. And I started in finance. Funny story, I had, I think, 11 interviews in one day. And my final interview at the time was a senior manager in finance who was Renee Jones, our chairman and CEO today. It was an incredible experience. I was exhausted. Didn't really know what I wanted to do. I had a background in economics. So I went into the bank doing some bank-like things. I went into finance, learned about the balance sheet, learned about how we made money, how we lost money. But as I started to navigate in finance and then treasury after that, while I was building the acumen and the capabilities as sort of an analyst, it was the relationships. So I kept navigating those spaces, finance, treasury. Then I went closer towards the retail business and managed the deposit portfolio, which really started to really get me closer to things like human behavior, right? If you pay this rate, some people will like it, some people won't, depending on what communities you're in or where geographically. People responded differently. So I started to see the implications to your decisions as an organization and how communities accepted it or did not, which is really interesting to me. Moved from portfolio management then ultimately to network planning, which is where are our branches, how do we show up in community from a physical standpoint, branches and ATMs. Again, got closer to community, better understanding of how we were received in the community and how we showed up, and where there were inconsistencies, which was very helpful for me to see. Then I took a step back and said, hey, as I'm getting closer to community, this is really interesting to me. We had an initiative called Buffalo Promise Neighborhood here on the east side of Buffalo. And it was how do we create this educational partnership between private and public sector and to really start to get into the community and be helpful in the space of education, anywhere from 6 weeks old all the way to adult, and really think about soup to nuts education, how we're supporting, how we're building community better, which was a tremendous privilege and opportunity to be in that space, to be with the community. And it was one of the most meaningful times in my life. It also was a time where I sort of had an awakening and a little bit of dissonance that I started to feel where as we were showing up in these spaces and we're trying to be helpful in community, there's a tendency for organizations, the larger you are, to try to impress upon people what they need to do to solve things for versus solve things with. And as I started to see that come up, we started to look at ourselves as an organization to say, wait a minute, can our approach change here? How do we think about community differently? We're part of the community, they're part of us. How do we build together? And it was a moment, I felt it really was empowering and inspiring to watch the organization start to go from a really good bank, a really good community bank, and how do we go from good to great? And it was really putting the customer in the community at the center of our focus. Not that it wasn't before, but to say it out loud shifted us into a space where now we could show up differently and better. And again, you're always constantly working on it. So the last thing, that was sort of the step number 5 for me professionally. And then it was now how do you sort of anchor yourself back into the bank and think culturally inclusivity and how do we build and empower and inspire a workforce and talent and colleagues that could help us be the bank for all the communities that we serve. So I know that was a little bit of a roundabout way to get there, but in hindsight, having the finance and the treasury and the real bank-like stuff and portfolio management helped me understand the landscape of banking. But then now how do we bring it to community better? How do we bring community into us, with us, and build with us in a really important way?
Oh, that's beautiful, man. That's beautiful. If I could, so I was going to just highlight a couple quick things out of that. I love when you said with, not for,
Yeah.
and then that will allow and equate to from good to great.
Yep.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
And I got to just call back to my time at M&T Bank. I was there in the commercial bank as an intern.
Yep.
And similar to your experience in a different but similar way at the same time, the Buffalo Promise neighborhood, I was with the commercial bank, and it was my first ever internship. And I'll never forget, first of all, the interview process.
Yep.
So when you say 11,
Yep.
I totally feel that right in my chest, because it was a lot as a 19-year-old, but it proved to be one of the most impactful and fruitful times. I'm still, in fact, in touch with a lot of the folks that are there. Doug Stevens, who I think is in CCAR or wherever he's at now, and an incredible man, nuclear submarine, just background. So without going to get too tangential, but just a lot of kudos and credit. So a lot of this is, again, around that diversity play. Not play, that's the wrong word, but the diversity topic, forgive me, plays. We're going to edit that out, Eric, because that's not... I would leave that in. It's not a play. What a play sounds like, it's something that's unauthentic or inauthentic, excuse me, and that's certainly not how I look at this world, as I consider myself to be an ally. So forgive me. But that said, I want to start with, and thanks for the intro, but start with, how do you define diversity?
Yeah, the problem is it's so broad, and it can be broad, as broad as you let it be. I think a lot of folks, it's so personal to folks. You say diversity, and they'll immediately think of the thing about themselves, right? Like so I might say to you, you say diversity, and my personal response, or it just immediately jumps, is, okay, dad's black, mom's white. That comes to mind. But what's more incredible is as you start to peel those layers and you realize there's so many nuances to people. And when you think of diversity and inclusion, your learned experiences are, you stack those things up, and there's this positive correlation between learned experience traditionally and sort of, status or money or whatever you call it. What I think people forget about are the learned or lived experiences. Right, so you stack these things up, and you go to school, and if I go for 4 years, I get this. If I go to 8 years, this. If I go as this, I'm going to make this. Right, which is maybe helpful, but it distracts you from, show me where I've been, who I've been with, what I've experienced, what I've learned from other people and other experiences. In what I've learned over time is, when you think of diversity and inclusion, think of those experiences, right? And it's, what do I expose myself with, whom, and what things that create a richer life and a broader life, and the possibilities grow. Now, here's the trick to that, and I'm navigating this as I go.
Please.
Right? You go up and you stack rank all this learned experience. Your lived experience feels singular, like it's coming through my lens, which it is your perspective.
Right.
But if you start to lean in with empathy to human beings, and you actually allow it to get closer and build meaningful relationships, theirs become yours. Right, if I understand John and the trials and tribulations, the happy, the sad, everything you've ever gone through, and I'm leading in with empathy, and I fully understand and I can feel it, your experiences I can take on to myself to help represent, but also expand my perspective. It's multiplicative, right? It's exponential. So all of a sudden you have this individual that sits there and says, I'm experiencing the world right now, and I'm building my perceptions and my beliefs off of it. If I can learn how to build more meaningful connections with human beings, right, and remove the bias that typically applies, which is, you're not like me, I'm afraid, pull that away and say, wow, that person, I need to know more about that person. I heard them say this. I need to understand that. Or I've never experienced that. And you start to lean toward instead of away. You get to multiply that sort of effect of those lived experiences. And then what I've learned is, over time, as you build on that pillar, the learned is nothing, right? That's linear, and it's sort of stacked, and it's singular. This becomes exponential. In those experiences, you build a whole human being there, and your ability to lean in and be empathetic is just incredible.
Wow. I'm trying to, this is not forced, and I think for those that are watching and listening will understand if they've watched the show or know me, this is authentic as it gets. Listening to that, I can't wait to go back and just replay that, because what you just wove there, that tapestry, that verbal tapestry about that, the learn versus the live, it's almost like theory versus practice. You go to college, you mentioned, 4.8, what it spits out. There's a theorist, if you know David Goggins at all, Navy SEAL, Buffalo native, he loves to talk about this topic, about the theorist who sits in the library, warm coffee, and they're writing out formulas versus the guy that's out in the crap, who's literally going through the slog. And That's just, it's just an additive
Let me
piece.
expand on that further because I love what you
please.
just said, right? Your learned experiences, when you think of your learned experiences, if you don't practice them, they don't mean anything at all, right? I took calculus. I couldn't even attempt it right now. I would have to dust some things off to do it. But if you're not practicing it, it doesn't count for anything. But when you start to apply the practice of it, it's something else. We know folks who have PhDs in things like diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. They've read all the books. They know about every culture, everything. They've read it. Walk them down the street. Show me their heart rate. Show me who they've been around. No matter what you've read, to try to understand a culture, if you haven't experienced it through another human being, right, it doesn't mean much, right? You could read it, but the moment life comes at you and that thing comes at you that you've never experienced for practically, it won't matter. And I say that to people. If you want to understand where your biases are, we all have them, by the way. So for anyone out there who would say, I don't have them, we all have them.
Impossible.
They've been conditioned and reconditioned and reinforced. Just do that. Walk down the street. When does your heart rate increase? When does it decrease? When do you feel comfortable? When do you feel uncomfortable? And use that as a compass. When I feel uncomfortable, I start to go towards. Now, I don't mean like if something dangerous is happening.
For sure.
But question, what is danger? If it feels dangerous, it doesn't mean it's dangerous. It means you may have a bias there that's blocking you from understanding that there's no threat there. Walk down that street and take somebody who is doing it in theory or reading books. Walk down that street. And if they can have a balanced conversation with anyone who approaches, right, with no hesitation, then they're practicing it, right? If you see that hesitation, or if you see them sort of balk or lean towards some things and away from others, they're not practicing it. And I think that's where the beauty of it becomes, which is anyone can practice it. You can read some books, that's fine, right? And there's a lot of readers out there, that's great, but if you're not practicing it, it just won't matter.
It's like working out, right?
Yep.
You can talk, you can plan, you can get all the books or anything, right?
Yep.
And I know you're an athlete.
Yep.
You played high school, college. I don't know if
Yep.
you played college, but
Yep.
so it's the same thing, right? In the athletic realm, and just back to Goggins, right?
Yep.
Like you learn about yourself when you're in those moments of discomfort.
Yep.
And he says something that I love, and I put this on my LinkedIn a lot: is do something that sucks every day.
Yeah.
Right? Even if it's for 10 minutes. You said, leaning into that, well, why do I feel? And there's an element of, so just to kind of navigate myself and be slightly tangential, but it's additive at the same time. It's there's a resilience, right? There's a lot you can compare. I don't know if this is where I'm going the right place, but free of judgment.
Yeah.
I think of entrepreneurship and I think of allyship, and I'm both. And I'll shout out to Kyrie Stevens at the medical campus and Royce Woods, Kendra Brim. These are folks that are close friends of mine that I look to learn. And sometimes they'll tell me things on their own by saying, "Hey, John, what you said or what you did, let me educate you a little. Let me coach you a little. And here's why it was wrong." Yeah. And if you're an ally or an entrepreneur, you have to be resilient. Yeah. In life, you have to be resilient if you're going to live a meaningful life, an impactful life.
So listen, if you think about resiliency, and here's the thing, right? We're wired to, it's unfortunate in some cases, to support our beliefs and defend them at all costs, right? It's like we grew up and your things are implanted in you, right? These beliefs, and some are really good. Like I was raised to be respectful and hold the door and say please and thank you, all those things. Mm-hmm. But there are other things that aren't as obvious that you grow as well. And that garden is a garden, and you got to weed it. What we struggle as human beings, and so far as I can tell, my experience is the weeds are growing just as fast, sometimes faster, right, than the roses. And if you're not careful, those beliefs are your beliefs, and you will sit on those things and believe them to be true because you heard one thing, one data point that you've taken on as a belief, and it could just be some hearsay you've heard when you were a young child, and that was reinforced over time. And if you're not careful, right, when you think of the reticular activating system, right, you see what you think, right? Like you will start to see things, you'll impress it out there and you'll start to project it out there and you start to see it everywhere you are. And if you're not careful, you become that. So what you said around, like, you have to be able to challenge yourself, right? And be resilient, and know that when somebody gives you feedback and says, hey, listen, here's how I took that. Here's the thing. Something in them is telling them that, right? And it's their truth. Whether you believe it or not, it's their truth. So you acknowledging that versus defending that at all costs, it's actually a freeing thing, and it's freeing exercise, but it's hard. It's not natural. Naturally, you want to be like, well, you're wrong. Let me prove to you. And you look at society right now. Everyone wants to prove that the other side is wrong, whatever the other side means. And I had a conversation today with a colleague, and I said, If you allow someone to label you or you label someone else, you will start to defend whatever label you've been given or you've given. What label, right? Like we said this, it's so complex. I am 5,000 different things based off of lived and learned experiences. If I harden onto it's just this and you can describe me by one of those things, and then I believe that.
Identify it.
No, then you're going to harden around that and you're going to defend and you're going to hear something and you say left eye right, up, down. It doesn't make any sense. So you've got to be able to challenge yourself. And the last thing I'll stop with as I'm babbling here is
not babbling.
You have to
pure gold.
If you want to change something or someone, worst thing you could ever do, right? There's one person you control, and it's yourself, right? And if your reality is sitting there and you don't like it, if you're out there pointing at everyone else that needs to change, look in the mirror. And the more you focus there and you start very slow and say, I'm going to slow down to speed up. And what am I going to focus on today? Start with your mindset. I wake up and what do I say to myself? Oh man, I got to go to work. You're going to have a bad day because you just said it, right? Like, what are you saying? Be mindful of your thoughts, be mindful of your actions. And if you do that and start very slow, things start to change around you. One last thing, and I have to go into this.
Please.
I said the reticular activating system.
RAS, yep.
I have a burning bush in front of my house. Bright red in the fall, lasts about a week and a half. My daughter had homecoming last year, and it was not until she stood in front of that bush that I noticed it was there. Bright red. For the next month and a half, now I can't unsee it. Every time I was driving to and from work, I would see every other home had one. They're all over the place. And like, look at, they're everywhere. But John, it shows how powerful your mind is. So if you're not being active in understanding your thoughts and being more intentional behind your thoughts, you will let life sort of live through you without living life. And I think you have to be intentional. And when you think about being positive, it's not being positive just like, I'm going to be positive and hope things happen. When you start to change your mentality, you start with positive, and you start with your mindset, you start to move through life, you start to see opportunities, right? And I think about people and things as opportunities and assets, not liabilities and risks. And if you allow sort of life to live through you, but you're not living it and with intention, you will see risk and liability all around you and people and things and experiences versus how amazing was that I get to sit with John here and have this awesome conversation with people and people that can listen and we can chat and go back and forth. That's kind of cool.
So cool, man. I got a million buzzards going on in my head about like, as I'm listening, because always listen to learn, not to respond. So it's that battle, it's that judgment and how to, because I'm listening and I'm like, this is pure gold. And I'm so glad there's a camera and a microphone here because seriously, like, I cannot wait to re-listen to this and just continue my journey as an ally and being proud of that journey and being proud to be an ally. But there's two names that come to mind based on the things you've shared that I think I'd be curious to submit into this conversation, see where things go. One, so it's hard. I'm trying to decide which one to go with. So Valentino Dixon. Many folks know that name. He's a Buffalo native, was wrongfully imprisoned at the age of 21 in 1991, same year I was born, and spent 27 plus years of his life for a crime he didn't commit. And he's a good friend of mine, and I've learned a lot from him. And I'll never forget, just to your point, I'll never forget when I said V. I call him V, Valentino for short. I was texting him the other day. He's got a book out. He's got a show. He's got a documentary, Discover. It's amazing. So texted with him, and I'll never forget, though, I asked him, Glenn, I said, what's the key to really growing and evolving and inspiring a large amount of people? And he came with one word immediately. It was neutrality. I said, neutrality. In a day and age where we're talking about diversity, neutrality to me is the same, or is like a middle of the road. So I said, can you expand on that, Valentino? He said, well, here's the thing. My mission in life, until the last beat in my heart is to help reform what I went through. But I am not going to go out there and bang my fist on a table and point at the controllers of these different entities and systems and think that I'm going to affect real change. I will not do that. And that's not who I am. I'm not going to be militant because everyone's I got goosebumps as I'm talking about it, man. And he said, so I'm going in and I'm going to chameleonize of sorts to who I'm talking to, but then goes back to, this is the tie-in. You talk about experience, right? So he has a lived experience of 27 plus years of time where he spent for something he did not do. And yet he came out stronger and looks better, candidly. V, love you, man. Than when he went in now it's been they're almost 30 years, whatever it's been, but he looks better and is in a better place because he knew what his purpose was to be. I don't want to comment on his mental fortitude, but coming out now he knows where he's supposed to be and what he's doing. But the neutrality thing, I'm curious to get your thoughts on that.
First of all, his story is incredible, right? He'll never get those years back. For him to be so balanced in a space to understand, though, the blessing that was. And I know that sounds weird.
I love it.
Right?
I'm with you.
The definition probably is off there, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, blessing in disguise.
It is, and if you let it be, it's a blessing, obviously. Here's the thing, right? And I think you'll hear people say like chameleon or shape-shifting. The reality is this: we will not accomplish anything if we can't meet each other where we're at. Right? And there's a rule that and again, it's sort of the thing that I have to practice and I have to tell myself. I assume, people can disagree with me, but if I assume the opposite, I'd be in trouble. I assume, without question, the person in front of me, there's nothing nefarious behind their motivations. They don't mean me harm, right? No matter what's going to happen in the conversation, if something gets triggered in either one of us, I don't mean to harm them, they don't mean to harm me. And if I go into that conversation there and saying, if I understand that they don't intend harm, and if an emotion gets triggered in either one of us and it seems to feel like it's escalating, I've got to de-escalate it and find where did I impose myself in a place where a defense mechanism, right, kicks up. Or I challenge, we talked about weeds, I challenged a value, right, that they truly believe. Your truth is your truth, mine is mine. Right. They both exist. And if you believe something that I do not believe, that has to be okay. Full stop there, right? That's hard for people to hear and understand, right? Today, but at the end of the day, if I assume that, and I assume there's nothing nefarious there and there's no harm to be done, I can then have a conversation with you. But we cannot move. You only move together, right? If you go out and you pound your fist and you run out, picture a rocket launching off into outer space. If there's no tether back to Earth, the Earth won't move. You're not bringing us with you. So to bring people together and grow together, you have to stay together. I used to, younger me, I'd want to fight and prove you wrong all the time. I would get in verbal, right? Before that, maybe not so much, right? but verbal altercations where I took pride in dismantling you, in sometimes in front of other people, because what I realized in hindsight now in my growth was I was that kid that was extremely shy and reserved as a kid, and I was observing and trying to make sure anything that I watched harming other people, I had a defense too. And I was going to make sure that if you were coming at me, I was going to find your weak spots and push that button. And I'm going to tell you right now, I got reinforced to think that was the right thing to do right early on. And then it spilled into, going to college and freestyling where I could just rip you apart real fast. Yeah. That was cool. In life, that's not cool. Yeah. Right? It's cool with your friends where you have an understanding that I'm not actually doing you harm, but I'm going to talk some stuff right now. Yeah. But what as I evolved and learned, it was like, oh no, that's the opposite. If I walk out of a room and that person has preconceived notions about me based off of what I look like, did I just reinforce those preconceived notions? Yeah. Or did I break them down and provide an experience for them to experience something else that makes them question that weed? But if I just tore them down in front of others, what did I just do? I just reinforced something they believe based off on a weed. I just reinforced the exact thing that I wanted to try to dismantle and provide another experience. So it's on me personally to experience life through others, but also make sure that the experience I'm providing them is one at which that's going to allow them to be more contemplative, right? It's going to make them sort of think like, that was interesting there. What was that? Can I get more? Like, how do I start to think about this and internalize it versus express and stand and defend? If that makes sense.
100%. And I love it. And to call back to some of the remarks you just made, there's another use case at the top of mind as you share that, and I'm going to totally de-identify it. Yep. It's funny because I'll just sidebar and say it is, and I can call it in myself again as someone who's, even like yourself, your evolution, you're all about evolution and growth, and that growth mindset. If you look at the book Carol Dweck, gold standard about how to be a better parent, leader, sport, athlete, whatever. Yeah. There's so much of what we're talking about here that comes in that growth mindset. So shout out to Dr. Dweck. Yep. But I gotta say, first of all, random sidebar. Do you know the name Yoga Steve Prochnow? He's the health and not to keep name dropping. It's relevant.
Yes.
Not trying to flex.
Yes.
He's at Buffalo Club.
Yep.
He was one of the starters of the Buffalo chapter
Yes.
of November Project.
Yep.
I'm telling you, man, the two of you remind me so much of one another, and it's a huge compliment for those that know Yoga Steve.
Yeah.
So random, but we talk about
I
just
appreciate
recording.
that.
You don't really know him that well. I don't be random, but maybe
Yeah.
that's a connection in the future.
Always.
Coming back to that use case, so totally de-identified,
Yeah.
learned and lived.
Yep.
There's an individual, very close friend of mine, very successful career.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget 3-4 years ago, we're sitting, I'll just keep it very de-identified at a place where we're sitting down having a beverage, and we're talking, and politics comes up with a couple other individuals.
Yep.
And at this point, I had not fully understood this person's political proclivities, and I was curious to see how it would play out. Yeah. And so it ended up being the complete opposite of what I thought. I'll just disclose that I thought it was going to be the right side of the aisle, and it was actually the left.
Yeah.
And it's funny because you used the word dismantle. This individual, I wouldn't say they dismantled the folks around me, and I was extremely excited for it, to be candid. But it was a dismantling done in a way that, like you said, it wasn't. It was to educate and to try to inspire thinking differently.
Yep.
But what I wanted to get to was, so after the fact, he and I we were one-on-one, he and I, and I asked him. I said, I don't want to be a bit weird here, but I'm just curious about, I think the stereotype would be that you are this person with this profile. Again, the perception, the judgment, right? And he went through why he. And I'll keep it to myself on this part, but he shared an experience when he was in his younger years as a new dad with one of his children, and that it clicked for me, and I said, "Wow!" So this is what now that lived experience that he went from whatever age his child was through their adult life. There was something that was going on that was impactful to his life to where it totally changed It altered the change of. The course of where his life was going, and it was such a great use case, and I use it all the time because it goes back to, like you said, I just wanted to make sure I just completely bold underline caps that lived piece. So anyway, I just wanted to fascinating, right? When you learn about people and you ask those questions.
But John, that's your superpower, right? You lean in to understand, and I think when you do that, then you understand, and you realize that behind every belief is an experience. You don't have to put any judgment behind it, right? But there's an experience behind the way people believe, and you have to trust that, and that's their truth. And you don't have to judge it. And I think if you do that and you practice that, incredible things happen. But I said a word, trust. Like, we move at the speed of trust, and that starts with, can I trust you? You have a conversation. The first time you meet somebody, a lot of people are looking with a side eye, like, where's this going? What is their motivation? All these things. But the moment you diffuse that, right, and the defense mechanism goes around and you pull it down, that's it. And if you can get to that space with more people, right, it all changes, not just for you but for them as well. And you're providing those experiences over and over again and replicating, and it just filters through. I think I had a conversation today with someone that was a huge supporter and advocate of me for when I was younger and going to college. And he was struggling thinking about where we are, right? If you think about the big picture, it can be scary. I rarely do. I'm going to be honest with you. And I'm practicing that because if I go watch the news, if I listen to this, if I listen to that, I can't, right? Because it does one thing that I can't afford to do. So how much time do we have? Is distracts me from the time I have, right? So instead it's, hey, why don't we just do what we know to be true, which is focus in the sphere you're in, with the people you're in the meetings you're in the calendar and the schedule you have. And if you just shift your behavior to be positive, trusting, understanding, leaning in with empathy, what you start to see is that creates a movement afoot, and you start to have richer conversations with people instead of how about the Bills, right? Great, Bills are doing amazing.
Weather
Love
sucks,
it, right? Yeah, like, it's like that. Those things, you do it less and less until then you have these meaningful conversations where, like, that was deep. Versus you're a zombie sort of stumbling through life waiting to have a deep conversation. It's your choice. So moving at the speed of trust, make sure that you build trusting relationships with people. And I love that example you just gave, which is they experienced something that changed them. Full stop. We experience things that can change us. A book's not going to change you. Your practice of that will, right? Whatever that thing, that experience you have can change you. So if I'm providing an experience that helps you understand yourself better and move forward faster, great. If I provide an experience that reinforces a bad behavior or a bad belief, that's on me. I have a choice. I get to control it. What am I going to be?
So the CTA in marketing speak, but the call to action here at this point of the conversation is to lean into those conversations. Take an internal kind of temperature check on where are my leanings, right? What do I consume? Like you said, when you don't see the burning bush up until just recently, where are your blind spots with the news, whatever news source you're going to, right? Go to the other side. I do it. I won't disclose political leanings. I mean, it's probably pretty obvious, but I'll go to the other side and I'll take a look and I'll try to understand it. And that's that deferred. It's not that it's deferred judgment. It's a deferral on judgment, right? It's to remove it and it's to sit back and just
be neutral and go experience it.
Neutral, man. That word neutral. That's fantastic. So there's so much to unpack. I mean, not to unpack, but to really process here. And I'm confident that folks will be excited to see that, again, you can't find it in a book. It starts here.
It's right in front of your face.
It starts here.
Yeah.
And I can't stress it enough. I'd like to just cover one or two more quick, brief things, and then we can wrap up. But I'm curious for the organization. So there's a lot of business leaders, or a lot, maybe not a lot, but there are business leaders, community leaders that take this podcast in. Yeah. For those that think they've done enough in the DEI world, what might they be missing, Glenn?
Yeah, John. Listen, it's simple to me. The moment you think you've done enough, you've done too little, right? And here's a mechanism that I use individually, but also organizationally. Ask. Right? Like, if you ask enough people across the broad spectrum of your people, you will find out the pain points. Just ask. Don't assume, right? And you have folks that's, the more senior you go, sometimes it's like, I've got myself here because I experienced some things, I've learned some things, I know. Do you know your people? Do you know their experiences? Do you know how they're experiencing the work every day? Do you know how they're experiencing the environment and ecosystem you've created in that organization? Do you know how they're experiencing, how they're trying to provide better experiences for their customers, for the communities? If you ask those questions and you put your employees and you put your communities at the center of your questioning and the center of your work, it changes everything. So the work is never done to me. And I look at progress and I watch people expressing themselves now in ways they didn't feel it was possible to express themselves. I watch people coming to work and they're being their authentic selves. I watch people growing their hair out, right? And doing things, frankly, they felt like they could never do. But that starts with that building trust and asking the question, what would make for a better experience here for you? And if you solve for that and people have better experiences individually, they will then go do their work in a way that they're going to provide better experiences for customers, for communities. And it's just the perfect extension. I think we skip over, what does the customer want? The customer's never wrong. Sure, but who's delivering that experience to the customer? And if they're miserable, and you've been provided the same, if not more support to them, to support them in their aspirations and who they want to be, and really get in deep with them, they can't possibly provide the best experience to their customers.
Wow, beautiful. So just ask. Reminds me of another slogan that I like to live by. There's no finish line.
Oh,
there's no finish line.
Love that.
There's just not. It's a guy. I got to shout out Goggins again.
Listen,
he's the guy who came up with that.
I got locked in, which feels like a Goggins thing as well. And then like Say Less on the other side, which is a brand, but it's also I believe that it's staring back at me.
I love that. Just a reminder. It's those reminders, Glenn. Right?
It is. And listen, you see what you want to see. What movie was that from? Maybe The Sixth Sense, where people see what they want to see. That's very true. This is going to sound goofy, but
Please.
I'm on TikTok.
Love it.
And I love TikTok, but it's a choice. So if I pull up my For You page right now, you're going to see positive affirmations. You're going to see positive stories. You're going to see how to think, and grow, how to be supportive. Like, you're going to see what I'm saying, but that's a choice. And every once in a while, I'm flipping through, something will come in, and I'm like, I can't spend too much time looking at that because it'll change. And I've had people say to me, I don't like it because I see, weird stuff. It's a black mirror, right? It's literally staring back. It's showing you what you interact with. And I don't think people understand it, right?
That's so good.
So if you're what you don't If you look into it and you see something you don't like, change it. Right? It'll tease you into those directions, but you will not go down the path unless you choose to. It's the perfect, like almost real time to say, where am I at mentally right now? Where am I at in my thought process? And if you start to see some ugly, you need to be more intentional around your thought process, what you're interacting with. And I think I try to practice that there clearly. And then in every space and action I take on a day-to-day basis, like how do I be intentional? Am I being helpful? And if I walk away from a conversation with someone or a meeting, did I help? That's the answer, right? It's never like, did I accomplish these 5 different things? Like, no, was I helpful? Was I hurtful? If the answer is the latter, full stop, fix it. Neutral's not good either, right?
Well,
neutral is like
sure.
You're not living life. It's how to be intentional and make sure you're helping.
Intentional and deliberate there, Glenn. Intentional and deliberate. And again, you're saying so many things that are just so rich that trigger things in my brain in a positive way. Yesterday, go to LinkedIn. That's how I first, I think we've got mutuals. I mentioned a few names, but I love your ethos on there. And just yesterday, I had a thought. I was, not to keep name dropping, but Steve Colton, he's one of the co-founders of Encore Golf, one of my best friends, and also a fellow ally.
He was an ex-Cementeer as well, I think.
He
a long time ago.
He might have been on his Wall Street days in New York City.
Yes. Yep.
Steve is truly one of the most incredible individuals that I've ever met, and an ally, and just an incredible. Anyway, he inspired me. We did a run over the weekend, a couple weekends ago, and I had a plate. I love ketchup.
Yep.
And it goes back to what you said about growing your hair and being their true authentic selves. And so yesterday I posted about the id-gaff muscle. Yeah. You know what the id-gaff muscle is, Glenn?
Yeah, I saw that.
I can't say the...
I saw that post. Yeah, that's right.
The ketchup, and I don't want to say that the last part, but I don't give a you-know-what. Yep. And but there's a nuance to it, because people might see the top of the fold on that post and say, "Oh, cool," because you've heard it, right? Yeah. People be their true, authentic selves. Like, all my warts,
unapologetically. I'm front and center.
Never that, right? And but when you can find a place where okay, like I talked about in the post, know what you love, know what you're against, know what you're here to do. I know that I love ketchup.
That's right. So do I, by the way. So kudos to you.
Fist bump. Let's go. And you gotta own that. You gotta own that. And maybe not the sugar piece.
And I've added a word to it, right? We tell people to be their authentic self, and I think you gotta add best to that, right? Because every day you're trying to be better than you were the past day, or at least you should be. Right. And I can show you my warts, but that's me being vulnerable. So I can then release that as a anchor and start to work and get better. But if I'm throwing that wart in your face and saying, deal with it, that's not what we're talking about here, right? Be your best authentic self. Are you working on yourself and not presenting yourself in a way that is growth and growth mindset versus fixed mindset, which is I am what I am and
can't change
it. And deal with it. Like that's a weird, right? That's not that neutrality, right? That's in your face. And listen, there's a time and a place where maybe you have to be a little bit more forceful. But then you think about leaders in the past. You think about the evolution of, I'll go there, Malcolm X, right? Like, this dude was all of that at first.
Right, militant.
Right? And then he had a realization. He had an experience. He went overseas and he had an experience. And he realized the beauty in diversity. He realized the beauty and the power in understanding we all have a common thread. And that was a game changer. Not to speak for him, right? But that was clearly a game changer. And what kind of experiences are we providing for each other?
I love it. I mean, this could go on for hours, because as you say that about the diversity, I want to be respectful of time too. Yep. I'll just shout out my dad. Psychologist. He's 41 years at my alma mater, Niagara University. Yep. He got his start at Attica. And he was already someone who grew up on the east side of Buffalo. Yep. His friends were black and brown. Yep. And so that had, again, that lived experience. Yeah. And I got goosebumps talking about it, but man, that was so crazy when I got Valentino and my dad connected, because my dad taught when Valentino was there. He never taught him. It doesn't. The records don't show that. But my dad named 5-6 people that Valentino knew. Yep. And I got a photo of my dad with one of his students. He still talks to several of them to this day. Some of these people killed people, but it was 30 years ago, and they were, again, it goes to that frame, that point in time. Yeah. It's hard to judge someone at a point in time when they're 17 and they're homeless and, they're trying to provide and something goes wrong, just as an example. But the point is that was such an impactful experience for him. He was already there. He was already a person of diversity, but having that experience and getting to know those inmates and then seeing them graduate the internal program they had at Attica and then seeing them get released and then staying in touch with them all those years, that is a lived experience that what I would get, and actually I'm totally all over the place, but my dad teaches psychology of poverty at Niagara.
Yeah.
And I have said to my dad, I said, what I would give to accomplish the feat of having every human in the world take a psychology of poverty course. There's 30 articles I think he gives to his students. They're usually at the senior level, and they read through these articles and they talk about it in a disarmed, safe environment every class. Yeah. And he shared some of the findings with me, and it's like for instance, someone who's unhoused, right? Yep. Someone who, or homeless, the former language, but it's unhoused is how it should be. Someone who's unhoused, get a job. Guess what? If you don't have an ID, you don't have a physical address, you cannot get a job. If you do not have an ID, which shows who you are, or the home address. So it goes back to, this is with the tie-in. It's that judgment piece. It's that lean into something. Like I talked when unhoused people approach me, I want to talk to them. I want to ask them how they're doing. I want to see, like, I usually don't hand out dollars unless I have something on me, which I usually don't. But hey, I've got some food here. Would you like some? I've got a gift card. I've got this. I've got that. And the things you can learn, Glenn, as you already know best.
Yeah.
Forever impacted, man.
Oh, John, I love that. And it's the judgment thing. Like, I would say this, right? If you're going to judge, then judge one person, and that's yourself. And I would argue, if you're going to do that, don't do it for long, right? Because if you sit in a space of feeling guilty that you made mistakes, we mistake our way through life. You don't walk by standing up and walking. You fall on your face. You don't ride your bike. Right? You don't talk by talking. You babble. So get over it. Acknowledge it. Right? How do you do better next time? And go. So I would say, reserve your judgment for yourself. Worst, best case, and
temporary,
and don't stay there. Right? Then you stay into solutioning mode. And how do I get better? And how do I improve upon myself? But the moment you judge someone else, that's a direct judgment of yourself. In a negative way, right? And it's something that, here's the good news. We all have it within us to decide and choose differently. But it's a choice. And you see this, you react. Stop. What are you reacting to? Is it a real reaction? Is it an informed reaction? Is it just a bias coming through that you're just out of the gate? Get a job, right? You have no idea that person's circumstance. Have you leaned in? Have you asked those questions? Right. And if you don't know, just reserve judgment. Don't judge. Assume. There's nothing nefarious behind it, and there's probably a story that you're not aware of. That is the reason the person is sitting in the space. And once you do that, it changes everything around you, right? You start to approach things in that curious way. Like, think about curiosity as a kid. You went around and got into trouble trying to figure out life. Why don't we still do that? Why don't you just go with it with just open arms and mind and eyes, saying, like, I'm going to walk over there because that's interesting over there. As a toddler would do that. And what do we do as parents? We grab them by the arm and pull them back. Right? Those are the things, right? When you're thinking about it, like, you want to have the curiosity of a toddler. And then as a parent now, which I am with two daughters, we try to resist pulling back their arm, right? Let them explore safely, but careful on how much you pull back their arm, because those things then last for life.
They need to live those experiences.
And the fear of trying something different, the fear of taking a risk. Risk isn't real, right? It's perceived. And if your perception is something's risky, it's risky. And you won't do it.
Self-imposed.
Right? That's right. Always.
Glenn.
Yep.
Oh, man. Two last quick things. This is something I learned from Mark Sullivan from Catholic Health.
Yeah.
I like to give attribution. It's not to name
Love
drop.
it.
I've called out to it now. It's
it.
clearly something I need to deal with.
I love it.
Clearly something. Well, some people, again, right? I'm judging what the audience might be judging, right? By me sitting here saying, like, I'm worrying about, do people think I'm trying to flex and name drop, which I'm not.
Yeah, you don't need to say it.
But I like the attribution piece, because these are people who've impacted me. So Mark's a friend, and I'll never forget, on my birthday, he sent me a LinkedIn video, June 3rd this year, and he said the words along the lines of, on behalf of everyone that you've, and I'm going to say this to you, by the way, that's the point.
Yep.
On behalf of everyone that you've touched, impacted, supported, helped grow, a hearty thanks on my behalf and on their behalf, because, man, I'm like a kid in a candy shop right now with this conversation. I could go hours with this. I wish we could, but time finite. We got to be moving and shaking. But I know. Amazing. So hearty thanks.
Listen, thank you. And I don't. And this is another thing I try to live by. Like, the moment I met you, you just get it. You're like, oh man, like there's something there. This is as important to me, if not more. Like, I derive more from this than you could possibly. And I need you to know that, right? Like, when you go into these and you activate with somebody and you engage with somebody else, what are you learning, right? Not what are you preaching or what are you telling. And I think the moment you can be vulnerable, tell a story, but then listen to theirs and grow and learn together, like, that's it. We walk out of here, I learned a lot from you. Your passion is absolutely incredible. I love that you connect other names because they're people who have influenced you for the better. And there's thousands of people behind me that are helping me be a better person every single day, and you're one of them as well. So I want to thank you for that.
Glenn, thank you, man. Wow. I can't. I'm going to literally listen to this when I sit down at the desk as I'm processing this through Adobe. I'm going to be listening to this. On such a great note, I hate to not to end it this way, but if folks want to learn more about the DEI initiatives at M&T Bank, the things you're doing in the community, the nonprofit, whatever, how might they connect? Where could they potentially go? Just very briefly.
Yeah, very quickly. You can go to mtb.com. You can check out About Us page. You can go to Environmental and Social Governance, and you can see our diversity stuff as well. And we've got a rundown of a lot of the work that we have. And for everything you see there, it's just a teaser to everything that's going on. The other thing I would tell you is there are a lot of folks that work around here at M&T. Talk to them. That's where the rubber meets the road. Talk to them and see what they're experiencing, because at the end of the day, if they're not experiencing the work, we're not doing anything at all.
Cool. So a hearty thanks, man. I want to shake your hand, Glenn. Thank you. And this is another impactful, inspiring episode of the Incept Connect podcast. We will see you on the next show. Thanks for watching and listening.